The Secret Story of Him, From Enslaved to the Grave, the Man Who Freed More Slaves Than Harriet Tubman. Chapter 19. The Devil Didn't Raise Me. By spring of 1863, the Confederacy was bleeding from 1,000 cuts. Some came from Union cannons at Antietam and Shiloh, but others, the deeper ones, came from us. The Arkemen had become a shadow army, striking not just at plantation houses, but at the very arteries of the Confederate war machine. I stood at the edge of the Selma Arsenal compound, watching the guards patrol with their Springfield rifles gleaming in the moonlight. The largest munitions factory in the South, they said. 10,000 percussion caps produced daily, hundreds of rifles, tons of gunpowder, all feeding the Confederate hunger for war. All built on the bent backs of enslaved men forced to create the weapons that kept their brothers in chains. "Those guards looked nervous," whispered Frederick beside me, a man who'd escaped from this very factory 3 months prior. His hands, scarred from sulfur burns and black powder, trembled with anticipation. "They've heard about us, about what happened at Pleasant Hill." Pleasant Hill had been our first true strike against the Confederate war effort. A powder magazine near Vicksburg that we'd sent scoured in a column of flame visible for 20 miles, 40 guards dead, tons of ammunition destroyed, and 38 enslaved workers freed and already moving down the Ida Trail toward Cameron. "This one's different," I murmured, studying the massive brick buildings through Midnight Red's brass spyglass. "This one's going to hurt them where they live." We'd spent weeks planning this raid, gathering intelligence from escaped workers, studying patrol patterns, learning which buildings held what treasures. Frederick had drawn detailed maps of the compound from memory: the rifle works, the percussion cap factory, the massive powder magazine built half underground for safety, the barracks where they kept the enslaved workers chained at night. "Remember," I told my 20 chosen warriors, as we gathered in the shadow of the pines, "we're not just here to destroy. We're here to free. Every man who walks out of those gates with us is another soldier for freedom." The plan came together like pieces of broken glass reforming into a deadly mirror. Raggedy Mafrelli and his team would slip in through the creek that ran beneath the northern wall, the same way Frederick had escaped. They'd carry the water hemlock extract, Mama Khalees's recipe made deadlier by Sarah's skilled hands, to poison the guards' evening meal. Eagle Eye Captoria and her sharpshooters would position themselves in the tall pines overlooking the eastern approach, ready to cut down any reinforcements that might come from town. I would lead the main force directly through the front gate once the poison had done its work. The wait was agony, each second stretched thin as cotton thread. I watched the compound through the spyglass, counting guards, watching for any change in routine. Then it began. First, one guard doubled over by the main gate, then another staggering from his post by the rifle works. Within 30 minutes, chaos erupted as guards vomited blood, collapsed in seizures, died clawing at their own throats. "Now," I whispered, and we moved like ghosts through the moonlight. The front gate fell without a shot fired, the remaining guards too sick or too terrified to resist. Inside, we found hell dressed in Confederate gray, nearly 200 enslaved men chained to workbenches, their faces gaunt from endless labor, their eyes wide with fear and hope as we cut their bonds. "We are the Arkemen," I told them, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent factory floor. "We've come to free you. Those who wish to fight, we welcome as brothers. Those who wish only for peace, we will guide to safety. But none of you will forge another weapon for the men who stole your lives." Their chains fell like dead leaves in autumn, each one a small victory, each freed man another crack in the foundation of the Confederacy. Some fell to their knees weeping, kissing our hands, calling on Jesus and Allah and ancestors whose names had been stolen from them. Others stood tall, rage burning in their eyes, eager for weapons, for vengeance. We worked quickly, the night air soon thick with smoke and urgency. 2 Fingers and his team moved through the rifle works, gathering every completed weapon they could carry, nearly 60 Springfield rifles, and twice as many revolvers. Teach, once a chemist's servant, directed the effort in the percussion cap factory, showing our people how to safely gather the materials that would become our ammunition. But the real prize lay in the knowledge. While others gathered weapons, I gathered men whose minds had been forced to serve the Confederacy's cause, men who knew how to make gunpowder from saltpeter and charcoal, men who could forge rifle barrels or cast bullets, men who could turn the skills their masters had forced upon them into weapons against those same masters. I can make percussion caps from mercury fulminate, one man whispered to me, his eyes bright with dangerous intelligence despite his emaciated frame. I can show your people how. Without caps, their rifles are just clubs. Another stepped forward, an older man whose hands were stained permanently yellow from working with picric acid. I know how to make explosives that will burn underwater, he said, explosives that can sink ironclads. We took their knowledge, their rage, their hope, all more valuable than the weapons we carry out. Before leaving, we rigged the entire compound with black powder charges, positioning them beneath support beams, inside ammunition stores along the foundations of brick walls that had witnessed too much suffering. As we retreated into the forest with our newly freed brothers, the Selma Arsenal erupted behind us, a series of explosions that turned night to day, that sent debris raining down for miles, that were heard as far away as Montgomery. The Confederacy had lost not just an arsenal but a symbol, proof that nowhere was safe from justice. The news reached Richmond within days. Jefferson Davis himself declared us terrorists against the natural order, placing a bounty of 15,000 Confederate dollars on my head. Union newspapers carried the story to Northern abolitionists celebrating while politicians wrung their hands about excessive violence that might make peaceful resolution impossible. They didn't understand. There could be no peace without justice, no reconciliation without reckoning. Every arsenal we destroyed, every plantation we burned, every enslaved soul we freed was a debt collected on centuries of suffering. 3 weeks later, at our camp in the Alabama swamps, I watched as our newly freed brothers demonstrated their deadly craft, mixing chemicals stolen from the arsenal, testing percussion caps, teaching others the secrets of the weapons that had kept them enslaved. These men, bent but unbroken by captivity, transformed our band from raiders into something the South had never imagined, a black army with the knowledge to make its own ammunition, repair its own weapons, and strike where least expected. We've hit them harder than any Union brigade, Midnight Red said one night as we studied maps by lamplight, plotting our next target. The Yankees fight for territory. We fight for blood. He was right. The Union armies moved across numbered battlefields, taking and losing the same ground over and over. We moved like water, like wind, appearing where least expected, leaving nothing but ashes and freed souls in our wake. Every raid strengthened us while weakening the Confederate spine. Every raid brought more knowledge, more weapons, more of our people to freedom. They called us terrorists, called us savages. But we were simply collecting a debt long overdue, with interest compounded by generations of suffering. I and him. In my hands, I held the power to burn a corrupt world to the ground. The Mississippi summer of 1863 hung thick and oppressive, the air so humid it felt like breathing through wet cotton. Perfect weather for what we had planned, perfect conditions for the silent death that would flow through Confederate camps, like the angel of death passing over Egypt. But this time, no lamb's blood would save them. Vicksburg was under siege, Grant's army pressing from the north while Confederate forces inside slowly starved. But the siege lines were porous, supplies and reinforcements still slipping in along the southern approach, moving up from Port Gibson through the plantation lands that fed the Confederacy's armies. It's not enough to destroy their weapons, I told the Arkemen gathered in our hidden camp near Rocky Springs. We must destroy their will, their numbers, their belief that God stands with them in this fight. Mama Kalisa had taught me well before they killed her. The root woman's knowledge ran deep as the Mississippi itself, carried across the ocean from ancestral lands. preserved through generations of healers working in secret. Now I passed that knowledge to others, which plants could kill, which could sicken, which could cause hallucinations or madness or slow wasting death. We split into 7 teams, each with a different target along the supply routes to Vicksburg. My group would take the main road north of Port Gibson, where Confederate supply wagons gathered under the protection of a regiment of Mississippi volunteers. Others would strike at wells, at stream crossings, at field kitchens closer to the siege lines. The poison came in many forms: water hemlock crushed and mixed into flour for biscuits, oleander leaves dried and crushed into tobacco for soldiers' pipes, belladonna berries mashed and stirred into stews, and for the officers' special reserves of whiskey, the most precious poison of all, concentrated extract of castor beans, what the Romans had called ricinus, what we knew could kill with just a few drops. We moved like shadows through plantation lands, our faces blackened with charcoal, our feet wrapped in rags to leave no tracks. Sarah led us, her knowledge of poison second only to her hatred for the men who'd taken everything from her. At her side walked Mary, who'd escaped from a Port Gibson plantation and knew every path, every stream crossing, every guard post between us and our target. The Confederate supply depot sprawled across a former cotton field, wagons lined in neat rows, mule teams corralled nearby, cook fires burning as soldiers prepared their evening meal. They looked so ordinary, these men who fought to keep chains on our people. Young boys in ill-fitting gray, old men with weathered faces, all of them believing they fought for something noble, all of them destined to learn otherwise before dawn. To many guards at the main entrance, Mary whispered as we lay hidden at the forest's edge, "But the creek runs right past their water barrels." Sarah nodded, opening her medicine pouch to reveal glass vials filled with dark liquid. "This is concentrated water hemlock," she explained, her voice soft but edged with hatred. "It will look like nothing more than silt in their drinking water. They won't taste it until it's too late." 4 of us crept along the creek bed, moving through shadow, freezing whenever sentries passed nearby. The moon hung fat and yellow overhead, occasionally sliding behind clouds to grant us deeper darkness. At the water barrels, huge wooden casks stationed at the edge of camp for easy filling, we worked quickly, pouring death into life's most basic necessity. That was just the beginning. While half our team poisoned water, the others moved deeper into camp, targeting the supply wagons themselves. Flour sacks sliced open, poison mixed in, then carefully resealed. Coffee beans tainted with crushed oleander seeds. Even the mules' feed poisoned, ensuring that the animals carrying Confederate supplies would sicken and die on future journeys. We were ghosts in their camp, invisible because they couldn't imagine us bold enough to walk among them. One soldier nearly stumbled upon Mary as she worked, but in his drunkenness, he saw only another servant tending to supplies. He paid for his assumption with a knife across his throat, his body hidden beneath a wagon where it wouldn't be discovered until morning. By dawn, we were 5 miles away, watching from a hillside as the camp below erupted in chaos. Even at this distance, we could hear the screams, could see men staggering and falling, some foaming at the mouth, others clutching their stomachs in agony. The poisoned water worked fastest, dropping men where they stood. The tainted food would take longer hours, or days depending on how much they consumed. "They'll think it's cholera at first," Sarah said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. "By the time their doctors realize it's poison, half the regiment will be dead or dying." She was right. Reports reached us 3 days later through our network of informants. Over 200 Confederate soldiers dead, twice that many too sick to fight, the entire supply line to Vicksburg thrown into disarray. Officers ordered their men not to drink from streams or wells, forcing them to boil every drop of water, slowing their movements to a crawl. But water was just the beginning. The food poisonings came next, spreading through Confederate camps like a biblical plague. Men died screaming in field hospitals, their doctors helpless to save them. Mule teams collapsed on roads, supply wagons abandoned. The siege of Vicksburg, already brutal, turned desperate as Confederate reinforcements sickened and died before they could reach the city. General John C. Pemberton, commanding Confederate forces in Vicksburg, sent increasingly panicked telegrams to Richmond describing an insidious campaign of poisoning carried out by Negro saboteurs who seemed able to strike anywhere at will. Jefferson Davis responded by ordering even harsher treatment of enslaved populations, believing it would crush our rebellion. Instead, it only drove more people into our arms, expanding our network, feeding our rage. Our poison campaign spread, striking not just at military targets, but at the very heart of Confederate society. Plantation wells tainted, wine cellars corrupted. Even church communion wine in Charleston poisoned before a service attended by Confederate officers and their families, leaving 12 dead including a brigadier general and his young daughter. That last attack earned condemnation even from some in the North. Abolitionists claiming we had gone too far, crossed some invisible line of civilized warfare. I read their newspaper editorials and laughed. What did they know of civilization? These people who had watched slavery flourish for centuries. What right had they to draw lines around our vengeance? They fear us now, I told my Arkemen, as reports of our campaign spread across the South. Not just the masters, but everyone who stands with them, everyone who profits from our chains. They lock their doors at night, test their food before eating, eye their house servants with new suspicion. They whisper about Bigfoot and the Arkemen the way they once whispered ghost stories to frighten children. By midsummer, the Confederacy had assigned special units to guard water supplies and food stores, diverting precious manpower from the front lines. Soldiers refused to drink from streams or eat food prepared by black hands. Paranoia spread through Southern society like its own kind of poison, weakening them from within just as their armies weakened on the battlefields. When Vicksburg finally fell to Grant's army on July 4, 1863, Confederate officers blamed not just the Union siege, but the Negro poisoners who had decimated their supply lines and reinforcements. Some historians later estimated that for every Confederate soldier killed by Union bullets, that summer another died from our poisons. We were not just fighting their armies, we were fighting their world. Every death by poisoning reminded them that the system they defended was built on poison, the slow poison of slavery that had sickened America's soul for generations. We simply distilled that poison and gave it back to them, concentrated and deadly as their own hatred. I am him, and my vengeance flows like water, invisible until it kills. The raid on Cahaba Prison. The stories reached us through the Ida Trail, whispers carried by freed souls moving south toward Cameron, tales that turned my blood to ice even in the Alabama summer heat. Tales of Cahaba Prison. They're keeping our people there now, Moses reported after returning from a scouting mission near Selma. Not just captured Union soldiers, but any black man caught helping them. Any of our people suspected of being Arkemen. Even women and children related to known rebels. Cahaba Prison, built in a former cotton warehouse on the banks of the Alabama River, had become the Confederacy's answer to us, a place to contain not just prisoners of war, but the very idea of black rebellion. Over 700 Union soldiers crammed into space meant for 100, and alongside them, nearly 200 of our people, captured Arkemen, suspected sympathizers, family members held hostage to force escapees to surrender. Eagle Eye Captoria had infiltrated the town of Cahaba itself, posing as a laundress to gather intelligence. Her report chilled us. They're keeping them separated. White prisoners on one side, our people on the other. But the treatment is worse for ours. No rations, no medicine. They're making examples of them, hanging one each week in the prison yard for the others to see. The prison stood in the center of Cahaba, a Confederate stronghold with regular army patrols and a garrison of over 300 men. The warehouse itself was surrounded by a wooden stockade 15 feet high, with guard towers at each corner. The Alabama River wrapped around it onto sides, providing both a natural barrier and a constant reminder to prisoners that freedom lay just beyond reach. It's suicide to attack it directly, Midnight Jones argued when I called our council together. Even with every fighter we have, we're outnumbered 3-1. Then we won't attack directly, I said, unrolling a crude map of Cahaba on the ground between us. We'll use their fear against them, their paranoia, their belief that we are everywhere and nowhere. The plan took shape over 3 days of debate and planning. Unlike our usual raids, this would require timing, coordination between multiple teams, and absolute precision. We couldn't afford mistakes, not with 200 of our people waiting for either rescue or execution. The first phase began 2 weeks before the planned breakout. Small teams infiltrated Cahaba and the surrounding area, spreading rumors, leaving evidence of Arkemen presence, a broken chain symbol carved into a courthouse door. A white plantation owner found dead in his bed with no marks on him. Whispers of poison in the town. Well, make them look everywhere but the prison. I instructed these advance teams. Make them believe we're planning something big against the town itself. Meanwhile, our main force prepared, 60 fighters, the largest group we'd ever assembled for a single action, gathered in a swamp 10 miles from Cahaba. We stockpiled weapons taken from Confederate arsenals, mixed fresh batches of poison, and trained for the specific challenges we would face. Former builders among us constructed scale models of the prison based on captors' intelligence, plotting every approach, every possible complication. 4 days before the planned attack, we sent our boldest message yet. 3 Confederate officers were found dead in their beds in Cahaba, blue-lipped from poison, with broken chain symbols carved into their foreheads. Pinned to each corpse was a note: "The Arkemen are coming for what's ours." The town erupted in panic. The garrison commander, Colonel Samuel Jones, called troops from the prison to patrol the town, believing the Arkemen planned to burn Cahaba itself, exactly as we'd hoped. On the night of September 12, 1863, we moved. The river approach came first, 20 of our strongest swimmers slipping into the Alabama River 2 miles upstream, floating silently down toward the prison's rear wall, knives clenched between their teeth, small waterproof packets of gunpowder strapped to their chests. Their job: create a diversion at the river gate, draw guards away from the main entrance. The swimmers struck just past midnight, 20 shadows slicing through black river water, the Alabama slick and cold against their skin. When the first charge lit the sky, the rear gate at Cahaba shuddered under the blast, coughing splinters and smoke into the stars. The guards scrambled like roaches beneath torchlight, shouting commands no one obeyed. That was the signal. From the tree line, 40 Arkemen emerged, silent, spectral, sanctified. They moved like judgment. No mercy, no warning, only reckoning. A wagon packed with stolen powder slammed through the front gate, and then fire consumed the night. Iron screamed, stone-cracked bodies flew. In the chaos, we surged inward. We were not an army. We were an answer. No shouting, no standoffs, just calculated fury. The locks fell fast. Cells thrown open like graves unsealed. The air inside reeked of rot and piss and forgotten names. We freed over 400 souls that night, men who had been caged so long they forgot the shape of the sky. There were black prisoners, arrested for fleeing plantations, for talking back, for being free in the wrong place at the wrong time. Union soldiers left behind in deals brokered over whiskey and politics. And white indentured servants, starved Irish, broken Germans, polished kids with dirt still under their nails from another continent. And then there were the deserters, men who had walked away from both flags, Southern boys who saw the cost of glory and said no, men who realized they were dying for land that would never belong to them. Some were chained like dogs, others were held underground in pits, not meant for living things. Their eyes were rabid with hunger, but not for food, for meaning. Ty walked among them, not as a soldier, but as something older, a myth carved from pain. One man, rag-wrapped and shaking, fell to his knees and whispered, "I didn't know anybody was real anymore. We didn't free them because they deserved it. We freed them because freedom is not a transaction. Because no war machine, no matter the uniform, has the right to grind men into dust and call it patriotism." By sunrise, Cahaba Prison no longer existed. Not in function, not in memory, just black smoke rising over the ruins and silence thick as scripture. Colonel Jones returned to find nothing, no prisoners, no bodies, no records. Just a symbol scorched into the dirt where the gates once stood, a broken chain with wings. We didn't just burn a prison, we unburied the dead. The smoke from Selma still clung to our skin, and the poison grain we left behind in Vicksburg had not yet finished its work. We had burned their bullets, soured their bread, and turned their war machines to rust. Every raid, every sickened well, every saboteur we trained whispered the same message into the bones of the Confederacy. You are not safe. Not in your camps. Not in your homes. Not in your blood-soaked beds. The Arkemen were no longer rebels. We were myth, a rumor made flesh, a plague with memory, the shape in the woods that children dream of when their fathers tell them history is theirs alone. And still, it wasn't enough, not for me, because, while the South rotted from within, there was one place still alive in my memory. One place still untouched by the fire I had become. His house, her porch, the place where I was born in blood. The Arkemen moved north, toward Union lines, seeking legitimacy alliances, bluecoats with gold buttons who could turn vengeance into victory. But not me. I turned south, back to the root of it all. Not for strategy, not for survival, for retribution. Let the others fight for tomorrow. I had unfinished business with yesterday.
Damn, I don't know about you, but I need to see what happens when Him makes it back to Master Samuel's plantation. You already know, it's about to get real ugly. Chapter 20 drops in 2 days. Like, subscribe, share with a friend, drop a comment. Author C.A. Witts is responding to every single one. Thanks for listening to The Secret Story of Him. From enslaved to the grave. This isn't just a story, it's reckoning.